The moment that was supposed to heal a broken royal bloodline didn't just collapse, it was pulled apart deliberately, almost surgically, at the final second, and the question that refuses to stay quiet is this: was this ever about safety, or was it always about control?
It's on high alert this morning, braced for a week of drama as Prince Harry prepares to touch down in London today. A last-minute change of plans will see the Duke of Sussex travel alone after Meghan and their children pulled out of their visit.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle already plotting to break these so-called new Megxit rules. Because, of course, Megxit was never going to last, given they aren't making any money. So they did this new deal with the British royal family with Alison Boshoff, revealing the Sussexes have agreed to a whole load of...
The world was waiting for a single photograph. One image of a grandfather finally reunited with his grandchildren. A moment of healing for a fractured dynasty. The stage was set, the flights were scheduled, and the global media held its breath for the ultimate homecoming. But at the very last second, the curtain fell and the stage went dark. The reunion was off. Archie and Lilibet were staying in California. The reason given to the public was a lack of high-level police protection. But if you look closely at the canceled flights, you will realize it was never about danger. It was about leverage. And just like that, what looked like a tender family reunion turned into something colder, something calculated. Because when flights are booked, staff prepared, expectations quietly raised inside palace walls, and then everything is canceled at the 11th hour, you're not looking at a misunderstanding. You're looking at a message, a very loud one, disguised as silence. Think about it. The world was primed for reconciliation. Cameras ready. Headlines already half written. A grandfather, aging, battling his own private struggles, waiting for a moment that now feels almost painfully out of reach. And then nothing. No arrival, no children, no closure, just an explanation that didn't quite sit right. Security, that word became the shield, the justification, the official reason. But the deeper you look, the more that explanation begins to crack. Because here's the contradiction that refuses to go away. How does a family living inside one of the most secure private estates in California suddenly become too vulnerable to step into one of the most heavily monitored cities in the world? The logic doesn't just bend, it breaks, and insiders noticed, quietly at first. Then, louder. Questions started stacking up like dominoes. Why now? Why cancel so late? Why attach the presence of two children to something as complex and as public as a legal battle over state protection? Because once you connect those dots, the picture that forms is uncomfortable. This wasn't just about avoiding a trip. It was about creating pressure. Look at the timing. The legal fight over security was already intensifying. The stakes were rising behind closed courtroom doors. And suddenly, the most emotionally powerful element in the entire story, children, grandchildren, family, gets placed right at the center of it. Not accidentally. Strategically, it changes everything. Because now it's no longer just a legal argument, it becomes emotional leverage, a narrative designed to pull sympathy, to shift public opinion, to create a sense of injustice so strong that it overshadows the legal reality beneath it. And yet, something didn't go according to plan. Instead of universal sympathy, there was hesitation, doubt, a growing sense that this move, this last-minute withdrawal, felt less like protection and more like positioning, like a chess move made in full view of the world, where every piece was placed for maximum impact. Even the language used behind the scenes hinted at it. The idea that access to the children, to the family, to that long-awaited reunion was somehow tied to something else, something transactional, something conditional. And that's where the tone shifts. Because when family moments start to look like negotiations, the story stops being simple. It becomes layered, complicated, almost uncomfortable to watch. And the palace? Silent, not reactive, not defensive, just still. That silence, it wasn't empty. It was strategic in its own way. Because while one side pushed the story into the public arena through statements, through legal filings, through carefully timed revelations, the other side chose something far more unsettling. They chose not to play, which raises an even bigger question: what happens when one side is shouting and the other refuses to answer? The answer isn't obvious. It never is. But the effects, they ripple. Because now the narrative fractures. Supporters split. Critics sharpen. And the truth, it becomes harder to isolate from the noise. Was this a father protecting his children from genuine risk, or was it a calculated escalation in a much larger battle over status, recognition, and power? Because here's the uncomfortable reality no one wants to say out loud when you step away from the system: you don't just lose responsibility, you lose privilege. And trying to reclaim one without the other, that's where things start to collide. And collide they did. Behind the emotional headlines, a far more clinical reality was unfolding. Legal frameworks, government policies, cold, structured rules that don't bend for sentiment. And suddenly, what looked like a personal dispute started revealing something much bigger: a clash between identity and institution. A man who wants the freedom of independence, but not the cost of losing what came with it. A system that doesn't recognize partial exits. You're either in or you're out. And right now, that line has never felt sharper. Because as the dust settles on this failed homecoming, one truth lingers heavier than the rest: this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. A battle no longer confined to private conversations or quiet disagreements, but one that's now playing out in public, in courtrooms, and in the shadows where decisions are made without ever being explained. And if this was just the opening move, then what comes next might be something no one is prepared for. And just when it looked like the entire drama had already reached its breaking point, the real battlefield quietly shifted away from canceled flights and emotional headlines and straight into the cold, unforgiving machinery of power, law, and something even more dangerous: perception. Because here's where the story stops being about a missed reunion and starts becoming something far more unsettling. The courtroom, the place where emotion doesn't matter, narratives are stripped down, and everything is reduced to status, precedent, and brutal legal clarity. And suddenly, what was painted as a desperate plea for safety begins to look like something else entirely: a demand, not whispered, not hidden, but placed right in front of the system itself. And the system didn't flinch. Because behind all the emotional arguments lies a truth that doesn't bend state protection is not a personal service. It's not something you can step away from and then reclaim when it suits you. It's tied to duty, to role, to responsibility. And once that thread is cut, the unraveling is permanent. But here's the twist that makes everything feel even more calculated. This wasn't just about protection. It was about what protection represents: power, visibility, authority. Because private security can keep you safe, but it can't make the world stop for you. It can't clear roads. It can't command attention. It doesn't send the same message. And in a world where image is everything, that difference becomes explosive. So the question starts to shift again. Not are they safe, but what are they trying to preserve? Because when someone with access to millions, living in a fortified estate, surrounded by elite protection, still insists on state-level security, it forces a deeper, more uncomfortable question: what exactly is missing? And the answer keeps circling back to one word: status. But the deeper this goes, the more contradictions begin stacking up like evidence no one can ignore. Massive deals, global platforms, carefully curated narratives about independence, freedom, and stepping away from the institution. And yet, at the same time, a relentless push to reclaim one of the most visible privileges that comes with that very institution. You can't walk away from the crown and still expect the crown to follow you. That's the rule. It's always been the rule. History already wrote that script long before this chapter ever began. And history doesn't rewrite itself for anyone, not even those born into it. Which is why the resistance isn't emotional, it's structural. And that's what makes this clash so dangerous. Because one side is playing with emotion, narrative, and public perception, while the other is operating within a system that doesn't react to pressure the way people expect it to. It absorbs it, and then it moves forward unchanged. That's the real shock here, not the refusal, not the silence, but the realization that nothing, no interview, no legal argument, no emotional leverage seems to be forcing the outcome that was expected. Instead, something else is happening. Isolation, not loud, not dramatic, just gradual. Because every move that was supposed to create pressure is instead creating distance. Every attempt to shift the narrative is being met with something far more unsettling than opposition: indifference. And that's where the entire strategy begins to crack. Because leverage only works when the other side feels it. And what if they don't? What if the system being challenged isn't designed to respond to that kind of pressure at all? That's the silent realization creeping into this entire situation. The uncomfortable possibility that the game being played is being played against something that doesn't play back. And then there's the most painful layer of all the human one: time. Because while strategies unfold, while legal battles stretch, while narratives are built and rebuilt, time doesn't stop. It moves forward quietly, relentlessly, taking with it opportunities that that don't come back, moments that can't be rescheduled, conversations that never happen, connections that fade before they're even formed. And suddenly the entire situation feels heavier because what's being negotiated isn't just security or status or recognition. It's time that can't be replaced. And yet the positions remain locked, unmoved, uncompromising, which leads to the question that now hangs over everything like a shadow that refuses to disappear. If this isn't working, if the pressure isn't landing, if the system isn't bending, then why keep pushing? Because that suggests something even bigger is at play, something beyond security, beyond status, beyond even the public narrative, a long game, a strategy that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. And that's where the tension doesn't resolve, it deepens. Because the more this unfolds, the more it feels like what we've seen so far isn't the full story, not even close. And if that's true, then the real question isn't what just happened, it's what's about to happen next.